meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jami Kaeb, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you're going to hear from men and women who've experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers or foster parents, or other people who are here to bring you hope and encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share with a friend. Remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. All right. Well, Chris and Jihae, I am so happy to have you on the podcast today. I'm looking forward to talking more with you and for our listeners to hear your story. So we're going to start right in with this. I want to know how you both met and how you fell in love.
Oh man, it's a good story.
Oh,
for
right.
sure. So I grew up in Canada, but I was born in Korea. And it's one of those funny things because people are always like, "Oh, you were born in Korea." And like in 1981, I don't know when they got rid of it, but I feel super old saying that. Like back in the day, they still had those like laws that you could only have 2 kids, you know, because they were overpopulated or whatever. And so my parents moved out of Korea and we grew up in Canada. And so this guy is born and raised Arizona. We're here in Arizona right now. It's hot. And so after I graduated university, I went back to Korea, which is where my entire extended family lived. And this guy was doing his military duty. He's a Marine. Fidelis Semperis, right? Semper
Fidelis.
Semper
You're
Fi.
so adorable.
Oh man, you know, all these Marines when they like meet each other, they're like, "Hoorah, brother!" And I'm like, "What?
Yeah.
What
does that mean?" I'm like, I don't really know, but no, just kidding.
So once Marine, always Marine. So he was in the Marine Corps when we met, and then so we just met through a group of friends. My sister lived in Korea still, and so we just all hung out. And
it was actually a Christian church over there, and I knew Jihae's sister. She was dating, now married to one of my good friends at the time, one of my accountability partners over there, and that's how we met.
Yeah, and then so we dated long distance. We of course broke up in the middle of it.
Yep.
He was
Of course.
That was on me.
I may have burned some stuff, and then we, you know, just brought it back and decided to get married. And so we've been married since 2005, and we have 7 kids. And we've been married for 15 years, and we're very happy still. We love each other and like each other, which is
amazing.
Important.
That is very important. That is something my grandpa always would say. He said, "I love your grandma and I like her." And like is better than love, because he said you have to love each other, but you don't have to like each other.
Christ commanded us. And there are a lot of people I love that I do not like.
Yes, that's great. Me and my husband say that a lot too, that we love and like each other. So I like that. Before you got married, did you dream about fostering or adopting? Or when did this all start for you?
I would say, I want to say we had talked about it before, but not actively. It was not an active part of our conversation or what we thought would happen in our future. And it kind of all came about when we had 3. We had our first 3 kiddos, Lily, Topher, and Mia, and they were at a younger age, and we were thinking about having a 4th. And so when we were thinking about having a 4th, we also wanted to start doing things to get our kids more involved in the community and giving back and being less self-focused and more others focused. And at that same time, we went to our church, and they were showing a video on foster care, and we watched the video and we were convicted by it, but not.
You were convicted by it. I wasn't convicted by it.
True. That's a true story. And even so, we weren't convicted enough to actually move.
Yes, because the first video that they showed was about a little boy who was like 7 or 8, and at the time our eldest was maybe 5. And we're like, no, that's definitely not the right fit.
Us, And then the next week they showed another video, and that one was parents fostering a baby, and we were
and they had younger kids too, and I was like, ooh, Like that's what I see.
Yeah.
I can envision what they're doing as something that we could do because we do love babies.
Yeah.
And we did foster babies for like 6 years
Mhm.
until we decided we were way too old and we needed to sleep again.
Yeah.
But it was like the perfect fit. We were like, we really truly love
Yeah.
babies. And somehow God sustained us to be able to not sleep for about 6 years. But it was the right fit for our kids' ages and for us, for what we felt like we could do. Like that was
Mhm.
like kind of our wheelhouse. So it was like our joy to take in babies, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you said he was convicted, did he bring it to you and you were like, "Forget about it"? Like, how did that conversation go?
I mean, it is good that we were on the same page in that, like, we were already open to having more children.
Yeah.
And I do
Mhm.
think that when we first started dating, getting married, all that stuff, we did think, oh, maybe we'll have 4 kids.
Mhm.
And we had
Mhm.
our first 2 like back to back, a year,
Yeah.
a week, and a day apart. And we're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Mm.
this is
Yeah.
kicking me in the
That's a
butt a
lot.
little bit. And so I was like, oh, 4 kids is never gonna happen because these
Mm.
2 are
Mhm.
gonna end me
Yeah.
probably. And so I just like I'm not a toddler person. Like whether they're through foster care or that have come out of my body, doesn't matter. I don't deal with toddlers well.
Mhm.
But then Mia, our third, came around and she was really good. Like she was easy. She almost potty trained herself. It was like, oh man, we are crushing this
Yeah.
parenting thing. We should spread
We're
this
pros.
gift
Yeah, we're
to
pros.
other people. And so it helped that like we saw this thing come before us. And at the time, I mean, there were like 30,000 kids in Arizona who were in foster care. So it was kind of one of those massive pendulum swings where like if something was wrong with the parents, they were getting taken out of their homes and
Mhm.
in foster care. So it was huge crisis. So we felt like this was something we could do to like, again, be a whole family and be on mission somewhere local. And then also do something that we, enjoyed, which was taking care of babies.
Yeah. And even with that, it was a process for us both to get on board fully.
Hmm.
Jihae talks a lot about how she was hoping that God would speak to both of us that, hey, we are not meant to be foster parents. We're just meant to
Support other
support
foster
other foster
families. Yeah.
parents or whatever. And so we just started going one class at a time, going to
Mhm.
the orientation, then and then it just kind of progressed from there.
Yeah, for sure. And
So
so I feel like a lot of times throughout this journey, we've been in the same book, but
mhm.
not always on the
Mhm.
same page,
Yeah.
occasionally not in the same chapter, but like eventually,
Yeah.
through prayer and conversation, through all of those
Yeah.
things, God has changed
Yep.
my heart on different things and God has changed Chris's heart on different
Yep.
things. So super thankful for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome. It's certainly a journey, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your family now.
Right now we are a family of 9, and we're the Watson 9. In fact,
Mhm.
I think we got a sign back here somewhere. But we have our daughter Kate, who we adopted as an adult,
Mhm. She's
and
28. She just turned 28.
28 now.
Mm.
Then we have Lily, who's 14, Topher, who is 13, Jess, uh,
Is 11, and we
11,
adopted her last year.
Mia is
9.
9, Gracie and Wes are both 5. And so we have 3 kids through biological
Mhm.
and 4 adopted kids through foster care or Kate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jess and Gracie are sisters, are biological
Yeah.
sisters. They do also have another sister who's medically fragile, so we aren't licensed. We weren't at the time licensed to be able to care for her. And also, again, it's just something I don't feel like we were able to
Mhm.
do for the number of kids we already had. But she is in a home right now that is going to adopt her, which is
Mhm.
fantastic.
Mm.
And then Wes is our baby, and he's 5 now. But he came to us as a 3-day-old
Mhm.
foster placement. He was our 3rd placement, and yeah, he's been with us since he was 3 days old, which
Yeah.
is crazy. And he was actually obviously the first one we adopted, and
Yeah.
we kind of went into this thing thinking we're never going to adopt.
Yeah.
Like let's just
We're
have our doors open,
Yep.
and there's only so
Mhm.
much I can do already having 3 little kids, and I don't think God's asking us to adopt. So
And we wanted our focus to be on reunification too.
for
And
sure.
Mhm.
and for me, I think that was a big part of it. But then obviously things change
Yeah, for sure.
often.
Yep.
And
So
Wes is just so beautiful. I mean, he was just like the perfect addition for us. And,
yeah.
Chris has a brother that he's very close to. He actually lives next door. And I'm close to my sister. And so it was just so nice when we adopted Wes. I was like, oh my goodness, the girls have sisters, the boys have brothers. Like, this is what I wanted. And so we were like, okay, we'll just keep fostering and definitely no more adoptions. Whatever
Yep.
got changed, that.
Yes, yes.
I'm happy about it.
So he was the first adoption. And then how old were the other kids when they came to you and then when you adopted them?
Jess and Gracie were 9 and 4 when they came to us, and we adopted them. Their process was very quick.
Yeah.
So they were 10 and 5 when we adopted them. That was last June
In the pandemic.
during the pandemic.
Mhm.
They're right here in our living room.
Yep.
And then Kate, we adopted that same day.
Yeah. So that we could
Okay.
close out the family nice and round.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing is, and I still extended family. 2 of our foster placements ended up getting adopted by close friends of ours that we still see often.
Yes, for sure. So we get to be a part of their lives too, which is, such an extra blessing for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Jess and Gracie are super interesting too, because even though Jess came as a 9-year-old, she'd actually never been in foster care before. And so it's just interesting, all of the different dynamics and the different family open adoption, situations that we have. And so like Wes, having been with us since he was a tiny baby, we have an open-ish relationship with his family, as in like we'll email them updates about him, which Chris really takes care of doing that. But like they don't call us, they don't email us back, they don't anything. So we Google them on occasion just to see if anything new is happening with them. But with Jess and Gracie, they have this huge family here in Phoenix. And so we recently talked to their, extended family on the phone. And Wes is in a place now as a 5-year-old. He's like, well, when do I get to call my dad?
Yeah.
Well, when is that happening? And so that's just been, just these layers of like
Definitely.
family. It's not just, hey, this is our family, we're so happy.
Yeah.
And we're all multicultural and it's like a really great time here. There's so many different feelings and things. And I mean, even Kate, the fact that we adopted her as an adult says something about her family of origin. Like, where are they, And so for her to openly be excited to be here with us and call us mom and dad, she has a rough history too, which is interesting, but is great. Like, she can speak to Jess and Gracie and even Wes in a different way than we can. And even though we don't come with these perfect past families either, Chris comes from a divorced home, and I just come from a really special different home as well. And so like it's great to be able to share these like common hardships, but I do think Kate kind of has this extra advantage to say, man, I'm here too because I needed a place, I needed a home, I needed a family, and we can't always stay with our biological families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've adopted an infant, you've adopted grade schoolers, elementary, and then an adult. Like, this is maybe a big, broad question, but what are some of the differences in that, especially maybe in the early days, or maybe you just speak to that.
That's a really good question. I think a big part is, with Kate is an anomaly. She's and we say this all the time, and we're not saying it just because they're our kids, but our kids are incredible, and they make it really easy for us to have a family of 9. So, and that was one of my probably one of my misperceptions on foster care in general, and kids in the foster care system. I came in with some very I wouldn't even call them implicit bias. I think I had some explicit bias, and just thinking, oh, these kids in foster care are troublemakers or are bad kids. And man, I get sick even thinking about that, having that mindset. And the kids are incredible. They're incredible kids that overcome a lot, and they just have they come from different situations than I did. Um, but yeah, so all that to say, our kids have been amazing. They've made the process very easy. Some of the differences for me, I think, are probably the different connections. So with Wes, we, having him as a baby, you build a lot of those baby connections, and so the difference from that and adopting a 10-year-old, the 10-year-old already has lived some life and has some connections and has more of an idea of what's going on, and that the world is more broken than maybe an infant recognizes.
Right.
So dealing with some of those things, and then trying to get them to talk and to share their hearts and their stories and emotions, and let them know that, hey, it's okay to share emotions, things like that. And then Kate, again, is just, she's an anomaly and already an adult, and that's very different than the other two, where we're like, hey, that's more of an addition to the house than like a burden on us.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
sometimes we joke that we had to trap her. We're like, we adopted you because we wanted to keep you forever. Because people are like, oh, you have this 25-year-old who lives with you.
Yeah.
Does she need a place to live next? And I'm like,
No.
actually, no. She's
We're gonna
stay
adopt
here.
her. Yeah.
We're keeping her forever for us. But I think the thing that strikes me about all three of those very different age ranges is the fragility. I think we think, oh, these babies need to be adopted because if their parents aren't caring for them as infants, like they're gonna die. And so just that desire to help out this truly helpless child who can't do anything for themselves. But then adopting these grade schoolers, being like, man, they're not. Our kids happen to have some struggles with education just because of lack of exposure, I would say, not because there's anything wrong with them cognitively or that they're dumb or anything like that, just lack of exposure. And so, man, so thankful that we were able to intervene at this juncture in their lives to say, we're going to help you to get your fundamentals, your reading, arithmetics, and writing, all of that stuff. But then even for Kate, I mean, last year, yeah, we had the pandemic. Last year, she was dating a boy who she thought was really special, and that ended up not panning out, which praise Jesus for that. But, there were still like moments in her walk as an adult that she just needed us. And she's like, the first time she called Chris dad was like after the breakup, and she's like, I just need to talk to dad. And I was like, oh my gosh, like Chris happened to like go out of the house for something. I was like, come back immediately. Kate needs to talk to you. And he's like, okay, I'm coming back. And, I just think it's easy to take for granted, like, oh, this age group needs help. I think every age group needs help. And I think just seeing how people are struggling in society right now, I mean, every age group needs help. And so how can we stand in that gap for anyone who is on our hearts, that God has put on our hearts? Like, it is important for us to answer that call, whatever that call may happen to be.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say that you have learned so far through this journey?
Like one thing?
I mean, I can maybe let you have two.
Okay. I'll start with what I kind of hinted on before, is just how I need to open my mind to different perspectives and understand that there are going to be a lot of people with different opinions, different experiences, and different ideas than I have, and I need to understand that doesn't make them wrong. That doesn't make them a bad person or anything like it. Means that they have a different perspective, and seeing that perspective, and finding ways where I can humble myself and recognize that, hey, I don't have all the answers, whatever the situation with the kids, different situations coming in, knowing that I don't have all the answers. And as a foster parent, it's very easy to immediately judge bio parents and say, hey, what have you guys done to put your kids in this situation? And we had an interview with Jason Johnson, and one of the things he said in the interview was, we were talking about kids being, it's the whole upstream thinking, and kids being thrown into the river. And you do the analogy a lot better than I do.
Just basically, like, if you picture you're sitting in a picnic and then you see these kids drowning in a river, so you jump in to rescue them, and then you and your friend are just out there just pulling these kids out of the water, but then one of the friends leaves and you're like, where are you going? We're rescuing these kids. And the guy is like, your friend says, I'm going to go upstream and see who's throwing all these kids in the water, and so, like, how can we attack these problems from the upstream issue, instead of always like putting on the Band-Aid of like, I'm rescuing, but like something's happening up there that needs to be stopped as well. But Jason talked a lot about how there are people at every level of the river. You do need the people who are at the top of the river, and you need the people who are down at the river. But some kids are just born into the river.
Yeah, and that was the big aha for me. Was I envision that these bio parents are standing on the bank throwing their kids in the river, and but
it's
really,
a long river.
That's not the case. Is a lot of them are born in the river, and
therefore have kids that just stay in the river also.
Understanding that, and how can we all as a community work to fix those problems?
Yeah. So good. I would say for myself, something that I've learned almost actually through work, not through foster care. I am part of a marketing team, and so we had to read Story Brand by Donald Miller. So I feel like a lot of people who are entrepreneurs have read that book, and it was really great. And he talks a lot about how a lot of times companies want to market themselves as the hero, like, hey, you have dirty clothes, we can fix that. But and then in movies you have that all the time, you have the hero of the story, but the thing that we forget is that there's actually a guide, and the guide is almost the real hero, but really just, they're important in helping the hero along. And I think it's easy, and I see this all the time because we did it ourselves, is like, we went into foster care as the hero. Like, oh, these poor babies, we're going to rescue them, we're going to fix them up, we're going to send them back to their families, everything's going to be great. And so our first foster placement was such a slap in the face, because I went into it with the wrong mentality. Yes, we did want her to be reunified with her family, but man, that burden that I placed on myself to be her hero was, one, incorrect, and two, was exhausting. And so it was just one of those dumb things. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was like, yeah, of course I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm going to take these babies in. And this one came to us as a 17-month-old, which, again, I don't like toddlers. So that was maybe a mistake. That we were like, okay, fine, our oldest that we'll take is 18 months. And so, of course, when they called us and were like, hey, will you take a 17-month-old? I'm like, oh, this is from God. Obviously, he wants us to do this because it fits in our age range. And so we said yes, and she was with us for 13 months. And the first 6 months actually were really great. She was really easy. She was very compliant, and, just she was good. She was happy to eat whatever we told her to eat. She was happy to sleep when we told her to sleep. But the thing that happened at that 6-month mark really was she turned 2. And then those terrible 2s came roaring in, and she just chose not to sleep anymore, and she didn't want to eat anymore, and she just wanted to scream. And then this guy had a shift change. He's a police officer. And so he all of a sudden needed to work on the weekends and sleep during the day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is not the best. And so it was just like a colliding of a million different things. But those last 7 months, like, I crawled through those last 7 months. It was not good. And it wasn't until after she left and I was reading this book a bunch of years later that I was like, oh man, I wanted to be her hero. And I felt like I had to be that stay-at-home mom and provide everything that she was missing in her life. And it was interesting because I called my caseworker one Saturday morning and I was like, hey, Kelly, I'm probably going to disrupt. Like, this is not going well. And of course, when you're going through those classes and you go through the portion on disruption, you're like, failures, losers, like, you guys are quitters, And of course, 6 months in, I'm like, oh crap, that's us, But it was great. I'm glad it gave me that perspective and that humility and also that compassion for people who have disrupted. Because it's hard. And especially when you have the wrong mindset going in that like, man, you can do this and you have to do this and you're the hero and you're going to fix all these things. You're like, this isn't what God even called me to do. So of course this is going poorly. And so Kelly was like, hey, you have to send her to daycare. And I was like my kids don't even go to daycare. Why would I send this poor baby to daycare when I'm the one who's going to fix her? But really, I was probably the one messing her up the most. And so, so that was like a big deal for us to send her to daycare. And at first, we started off with 2 days, and I was like, okay, that's good. But then I was like, I still need a break. So then she was going 3 days. And again, the guilt was there because Mia, our youngest bio child, was still home with me. I didn't send her to daycare, but she also wasn't a screamer, you know? And so our little one went to daycare 3 days a week, and then 4 days a week, and then 5 days a week. And I have to admit, some Saturdays and Sundays, I was like, I really wish daycare was open today. I would send you. And I think it's easy to listen to these stories and say, why did you even do it? Like, what, you obviously weren't the right fit to be a foster parent. And I think the people who are harshest about those, like with those kinds of judgments, are the people who haven't done it. So you can judge me all you want, but unless you've actually done it, I don't want to hear it. But I think it's good for other foster parents to say, like, man, what am I thinking about my role in this journey? And so just having that mindset that, man, I'm the guide. I'm not the hero of this girl's story. She's the hero of her own story. I want to be here as her guide and to help her through this journey of crazy life that, you know, God has given her. And like, what is my role in this? And maybe it is to be a safe place for her and to send her to school where she can also be safe and learn and be with other kids and stuff. It looks so different for every child. But I think I'm thankful I had my seasons as a stay-at-home mom, and I'm not a stay-at-home mom anymore. And I think I'm a better person for it because I don't know, we're all evolving. I'm growing, and I'm thankful I have this really great job that I love, that I get to read marketing books for, but that like I can enjoy being with my kids again. Because there was a season in there that I was like, I'm so sorry. I kind of hate being a mom, you know? And I hate saying that because there are people who struggle with infertility. There are people who've been waiting to adopt. Again, there's just so many different stories, but this is mine. And this is my portion that I'm saying, man, that was super difficult. And motherhood is obviously wonderful and full of joy, but that's not it. There's so much. There's the highs and there's the lows, and sometimes they exist at the same time. But definitely that first placement. And I think a lot of people get their butts handed to them in their first placements because you are faced with reality of like, man, I thought I was going to be this kind of parent. Turns out I'm this kind of parent. Is that okay? Yeah, I think it is. As long as you can like build that bridge from what you thought you were going to be to what you actually are, and just find, you know, some commonality in it. Like, I thought I was going to be a great foster mom. I am still a great foster mom with a ton of other people's help.
Yeah, I think it's such a key thing to remember that we are not the hero. We are not the savior. And it is easy, I think, for those of us, especially who have a lot of compassion, who are emotional, and we want to help. Like it's from this desire of so wanting to help and seeing people hurting and not wanting them to hurt. But I have come to a realization even just recently, and I feel like it's something I learn over and over, just in different ways. But I have come to the realization that I have believed this lie that I need to be my kids' emotional support in not just support, but I need to help them in their entire emotional. I can't even know how to say it exactly, but the point is like, one, it is exhausting and I can't be their emotional everything. Also what I realize is it takes away, it actually hurts them because if I'm their everything and when they're hurting and I'm always right there and I'm rubbing their back and I am giving them strategies and I am there until they fall asleep and I'm right there when they wake up, like they don't know how to run to God then because mom's there. And yet when I enter into their crisis and try to be their everything, all that happens is now I'm in crisis with them. And neither one of us are really much better off. And so there's a balance for sure. And we are called to be there. I'm not saying that, but we aren't their hero. We are not their savior. And so I think that's something that is hard for us but we all kind of have to learn that in one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit because you have a big family. I want to get really, really practical.
Mhm.
I am sure you have systems and processes in place to run your household. And so I think that our listeners would love to hear some things that you have found successful, some tips and tricks that have helped you manage this large family.
I definitely am a fan of schedules.
Yes.
And so, you know, Dave Ramsey talks about like free spirits marry, what is the word he uses for your type of people?
I think he uses like
type of
tight
people.
water or
Tight wash
something. Yeah.
something. I don't know. So it's funny, or like even like on the DISC assessment,
Mhm.
how you've just got all these different personality types. So in general, I feel like I'm pretty loosey goosey about a lot of things, but when it comes to the kids, I'm like, this is what we're doing. Boom,
Mhm.
boom, boom. And so I think that's how we survived the pandemic. I
Yeah.
think that's how we have survived as a family of 9, because I don't feel as frazzled now as I did when I was a mom of 2,
Yeah.
still trying to figure it out and still not having any systems in place. And
Yeah.
so we're not so stuck to the schedule that like we can't go out or we can't
Mhm.
divert from it. But these are just very simple things that we do that just again help us move along and also not be broke.
Yeah.
And so like really simple things like, the kids wake up at the same general time, whether it's the weekend or during the week for school, but they all eat breakfast, and we do things where they can get their own breakfast. I think when Lily and Topher were little, I was like, ooh, I have to do this for
Yeah.
you
You did it for the longest time. You did
for
it
the longest time.
like, and it wasn't until probably the last 2 years where we started transitioning into, hey, you guys are old enough to like make yourself a sandwich and
Yes.
do some of those basic things
Right.
where it takes a lot of the burden off of
For
Jihae
sure.
specifically.
I would say it's been more than 2 years, because I know this because Wes, our 5-year-old, is like the most self-sufficient 5-year-old I've seen. And it's because, like the cereal is on a shelf he can reach. He can get the milk. He can get bowls and cups that are really low. And so just those tiny things like just help you to allow the kids to do what they can do, and then I just have to do what I can do or have to do. So easy things like that, and then they know where to grab their snacks for school and all of those things. But whether it's the weekend or weekdays, usually weekends, I mean, we have a snack at like 10:30, and then we have lunch at 11:30, 12. But these like simple things help us to not be snacking all day and then ruining our lunch and ruining our dinner, and just things like that, because we can't afford to snack 7 kids all day. You
That's
can't be craving. So it's one of those things where some friends of mine are like, oh, they don't really eat lunch. They just like to kind of graze all day. I'm like, okay, that sounds expensive, but that's fine for your family. For us, we just cannot do it. And so the kids know, though, like they ask if they can have a snack, and I say, basically, what time is it? If it's before 10, there's no way you're having a snack because you just ate breakfast. And so just kind of those simple things that just help us to know what is expected of us and what we can handle as a family of 9 and what we can afford, kind of thing.
Yeah. And then I would also break down 2 other sections that are huge for just daily functions is the going along with that, the chores. We have constantly rotating chores list, and it's things that you have to do just to survive. So, hey, you as an adult, you're going to have to make your bed. You're going to have to do dishes. You're going to have to
Do laundry,
Like
wipe the toilet.
those things are normal things. Then we have the above and beyond chores, cleaning up the dog poop, mopping the floor or vacuuming or cleaning the toothpaste off the sink and things like that. So those and those kind of roll into budgeting, right? So our kids are constantly, and right now the 5-year-olds still don't do a whole lot, but
they definitely do more than when our older kids were 5 years old. That's
true.
always the perspective.
Yeah.
When the kids are like, well, why isn't he doing anything? I'm like, would you like to know what you did as a 5-year-old?
Yeah, nothing.
You did nothing.
Yeah, so we're trying to integrate them more into things that they can do and we found Gracie actually, she takes the initiative on a lot of stuff because she wants to be included.
Yeah,
Right.
she thinks everything's a party. Like, oh, you're picking up dog food? I'll come.
Yeah, she's like, oh, can I go scoop it into the bag? Like,
and the
she
big
does
kids are
the
like,
dirty
oh, yeah.
work too, man. She does the dirty work.
Yeah.
But So getting them involved in chores, and that helps the house to function. When it was just Jihae and I doing everything, things stacked up, and now it's a lot easier to accomplish things.
For sure.
Then going into budget, we also, obviously a family of 9, that's a big budget. And we're not millionaires at all, but we live by Dave Ramsey's, give first, save second, live on the rest. And, giving first gives the glory to God, saving second builds wealth. And then you live on the rest. And it's easy math for me, because I'm like, yeah, if we keep saving every month, we're going to build wealth. And then we're going to live within our means and be content with what we have. So family of 9, I'm a big spreadsheet guy. I love spreadsheets, which is so old school, but I'll actually manually enter all of our expenses. I know there's apps for budgeting that are much better than
But they don't hurt as much as when you have to put in 2911.
Yeah, when I put that in every time, I'm like, ooh, that's not enough.
Yeah.
And then we've started to get our kids involved in that too, because that's a huge thing for us. Is we want our kids to, when they turn 18 or when they go to college or wherever, that they understand that, hey, I need to know how to budget. I need to know what kind of expenses there are. So we give them a budget too, and
they have little green light.
Greenlight is a fun little app, and they have their own debit cards and they have their balances in their Greenlight account that they can, and they do all the same things. They give first, they save second, and they live on the rest.
That's awesome.
And the last thing I'll say with the budget is we empower them to do what they want. So family of 9, we're not going to say, hey, everybody's playing soccer and basketball and marching band, whatever you want. What we found is early on, when we were signing our kids up for all that stuff, they didn't want to do it. So they was like,
and it adds up too.
Yeah, and it adds up. So we'd be paying all this money, we'd be driving all over the place, and to watch our kids stand on the soccer field and throw grass in the air.
Yeah.
And so now we've allowed them they have their own budgets where they can do anything they want, but they're going to have some buy-in for that. And it's caused them to do things that they actually want to do, and it also and not do things that they don't want to do. So it's made our schedules a little bit easier for that.
For sure. And it's so interesting, like going back to the chores, we did read this really great book that we love, How to Raise an Adult by Julie Lithcott-Haynes. She's so fantastic. We love her. We actually did interview her on our podcast, which was one of my faves. But she definitely talks about the trap of overparenting and like helicopter parents and like what has that done to like this generation behind us, And so she definitely really drives home the point of like, man, your kids need to do some chores. And so it's so funny, like we have this whole like calendar thing on our fridge so that people can see, we have daily chores of like emptying the dishwasher and loading it back up, and then setting the table mostly just for dinner, and then clearing the table after dinner. And then the clearing the table also entails like helping to load up the dishwasher, which as a person who just has a plate, you should put that in the dishwasher yourself. But just those little things that help us to, again, not feel like, man, the kids go to bed, the house is a disaster, we have to pick up. Like we like to hang out after the kids go to bed. And so we just want things to be done when they go to bed. And so it's funny, the thing that I hear the most from other parents is like, how do you get them to do that? My kids hate doing chores. I'm like, yeah, so do mine. They don't want doing it. You just tell them to do it, and they have to do it. Like, I think a lot of parents just give their kids too many options or too much voice in the things that they have to do. It's funny, like we live in this really beautiful neighborhood. I'm so thankful. All of our neighbors are super stand-up people. I love them all. But some of them drive their kids to school, which again is fine. But they're like, well, I drive my kids to school because they don't want to take the bus. I'm like, okay. Our kids don't have an option. If there is a bus, they are 100% riding that bus. Like there has to be a riot or a serious bully or something very wrong happening on the bus in order for me to be driving you to school, when there's a perfectly good bus that will take you to school. And so I don't know. I think some parents feel really ragged because they're doing all of these things because they're like, well, my kids don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, talk to me in 10 years and let's see where your kid's at. because you've done all of these things. You've just like paved the way a little too well.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to do these things, or they don't want to do certain things that they have to do.
That was my childhood. Like when I was in the Marine Corps, this is so embarrassing. I was in the Marine Corps, stationed about 3.5 hours from here, and I would drive home on the weekends to give my laundry to my mom to do.
But bless Barbara, she just
Bless
loves
her.
you so much.
She does.
She did it with so much
Oh,
happiness
man.
and joy. She's
I
like,
know.
yes, Chris is home. I get to clean his underwear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, bless her. I don't know. Some of those things are different, but like you were also, getting ready to defend your country. So it's okay.
Okay.
I'm sure she enjoyed
Thanks
that.
for that.
That's right. That's right. No, I totally resonate with what you're saying because we also have a very big family and everyone has a chore and chores. And I've taught every kid at age of 8 to do their own laundry. Now, do they all do it well? No, but it was so interesting because my 8-year-old, I remember he had a jersey for his little pony baseball, and he's like, "Hey, Mom, I need to wash my jersey today," and I was like, "You just said you need to wash your jersey." It was so awesome. I'm like, "Yes,"
for sure.
it is. You just all of a sudden go back, and I've just told them over and over, we're a team. Like, I cannot do this by myself. Like, this is all of us together, and I just have I get to wash big dishes for our dinner routine, but everybody else does something else, and we work together and we get it done. So I think I totally resonate with what you're saying. I think, and I agree with you, like when I had just a few kids, I did a lot more of that stuff because you could. I think having the big family, actually, you just truly can't keep up.
Absolutely.
And so it kind of forces you to delegate.
Yeah. No, and it's good. It's
It
good
is
for
good
everyone.
for them.
For the parents, and it's good for the kids for sure.
It is. It is. Okay, so another piece that I think is so important as we have a lot of kids, and really this is for anyone, whether you have 1 kid or 9, right? Is that we want to make our kids feel seen and heard and not just like one of the crew.
Yes.
How do you do that with your kids?
It's funny because sometimes I'm like, we are dominating this. Like, we are so good at this. And then we'll hear from one of our kids that are like, I never have any me time. I'm like, thought we were crushing this. What we do is, and it's one of those things we have to be intentional about. And I think even with our relationship, there was a year where we I don't think went on a date.
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, we just looked at each other and said, why are we not making our marriage a priority? And that was probably year 7 or 8 of our marriage, and then we had to be intentional about it. And it's the same thing with the kids, is we have to be intentional about dating our kids. And that's something that, birthdays are one thing. We've started a tradition where Jihae and I will take the birthday kiddo out for a dinner, just the 3 of us. And
like a nicer one, not just McDonald's.
Which is what they always want. We're like, no, we have to be able to tip somebody, and not just in the bucket. Like, we have to sit down and
But then also the kids also have to order off a menu and say to the waiter, like, I would like a Sprite and chicken nuggets, and that kind of helps them to also interact with strangers.
Yeah, and then in those moments, the other thing is not just checking off, hey, we went on a date with our kiddo, being intentional about engaging them. And so we've started asking different questions, like, what has been your favorite part of your first 5 years on alive, and whatever it may be, or whoever the kiddo is. So talking about different things, and sharing ourselves too, saying, so for instance, with the 11-year-old, saying, hey, tell us your best and toughest memories, from your first 11 years. And then I'll share mine, Jihae will share hers, and we're able to engage in that conversation and get different perspectives and hear different things. So that's been really good. But the dating thing, that's the other one, is finding opportunities to get the kids alone. And for me, sometimes it's just going to Costco or Home Depot And those are good times where I just take one kiddo with me, whoever it is, and sometimes we get a Starbucks. They know that when they go with Dad, I'm always going to buy them something.
Yeah.
They always want to go with Chris. Yeah.
That's
But I think
awesome.
on a day-to-day basis, because I mean, there are some seasons that are busier than others, and we're like, oh, we haven't dated the kids in a while. We have some friends who are so good about it, and they have it on their calendars. And I do believe, like, if it's not on your calendar, then it might as well not exist because it's just not going to happen. So all of those dating things are good, but unfortunately, we do kind of fall into seasons.
Yeah.
Which is why the birthday is nice because that definitely happens every year, and we know that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's going to start happening more regularly. But I just think on a day-to-day basis, like we definitely try to eat dinner every day together. And so fortunately, we're in a schedule right now where Chris is home, but I would say on weird times when he changes his schedule, then we'll have to make like breakfast the intentional family time. And so I think it's important to make sure that you have some time during the day, almost every day, even if it's like 4 times a week. I think that's still good. And I feel like we've read so many parenting books by so many successful parents or so many successful people who are like, oh man, my parents were a big part of making me who I am, this great millionaire. And one thing that they did was that we ate dinner together. And so we are big, strong believers in eating dinner together or a meal. But when we do eat together, we just do highs and lows every single day. And I think that is also just a really tiny opportunity for every single child to say something that's on their mind. And I think it's easy when you don't have that intentional time for the talkers to talk and the quiet ones to fall back and feel like, oh, no one cares, or I don't want to say anything. I don't have anything important to say. Like everyone has a time to share, and we all want to hear it. And so I think that is important for us to just remember. It's so easy, but it's something we take for granted. And if our schedules are too busy, like, oh, we have soccer every day of the week. I think it's important to like double check, like why do we have soccer every day of the week? You know? And just the yes to soccer is a no to something else. And unfortunately, I would say that no is to family time because you're just shipping kids off here and there. And why? Like, what is the point of that? Like, if you guys are really dead set on getting soccer scholarships, then, you know, you're doing the thing that you're setting out to do. But if you are setting out to have a close family that cares for one another and that recognizes, man, we all want to be seen and known, how are we going to do that? It's probably not through going to soccer every single night of the week, you know? And so, again, no shade on people who have really good kids who are really great at soccer. Go forth and do that. I hope you guys are eating breakfast together. But, you know, for us, I don't see any of our kids going on any sports scholarships, which is just fine.
We got mathletes.
We got some athletes.
We don't have Galens in this house. We've got
we're not all
bunch
making it
of
to the
athletes,
NFL Galen. But
Galen, for our listeners who
Elmore,
maybe don't understand, works at TFI now, but was on their podcast.
And made it to the NFL, which is a big deal.
Yes, he did.
But, you know, I think it's easy for us as parents to have these dreams, right? Like, ooh, I hope my kid makes it to the NFL. I hope my kid goes to Harvard. I hope they're a millionaire doctor and they support us. But, like, you know, at the end of the day, what's realistic? And, like, at the heart of it, what do we want our children to look like? And we have some really great mentors who early on were like, hey, you keep talking about how you don't want your kids to be a certain way. You don't want them to be punks. You don't want them to be menaces to society. That's too broad a scope of what you don't want them to be. What do you actually want them to be? And then like you can shoot that target a lot with more precision and with more intentionality. And, you know, they've done studies of like, what are the traits of the most successful people in the world? And it's that they're kind, compassionate, and forgiving, a lot like Jesus was, you know? And so for us, that just made us pivot. In fact, our small group used to be called How to Not Raise A-Holes. Sorry, you can't say that. You can just blur that out on your editing. But, you know, that's literally what our small group was called. We had a text message group called that. But when we told them this thing that our mentors had told us, we changed it to How to Raise Awesome Adults. Because that is a way more precise goal. Again, that's just the title of our small group. But we want our kids to be a certain way, and we do just want them to be kind and compassionate and forgiving humans.
Mm,
And so what are the things that we're going to do on a daily basis, on a quarterly basis, whatever, to like hit that goal?
Yeah.
And so we're not doing it all right,
No.
at all.
Yeah.
We have some really bad days. We have some really good days. I love hearing like some parents do a lot, like a really long bedtime routine. They like lay in bed with their child, they rub their back, they want to hear everything. I'm so sorry, I don't have anything left usually at bedtime, and we have 7 kids. I find it difficult to think about laying down with all 7 of them rubbing their backs. But again, like that time, that dinner time, we do devotional every day. And again, like that's something we were like, oh, it's a great idea to do devotionals every day. It only sometimes happens. And I would say 2 years ago, we pivoted. We're like, man, we say we want our kids to love Christ and know Christ. How are they doing that besides going to church? And so that is another thing that we added into our routine recently, that we're like, no, we do devotionals more or less every single day. Like there really has to be something that happened that night that made us not do devotionals. But that's the exception, not the rule anymore. And so we do devotionals and we pray, and the kids take turns praying for one another and for other requests that happen in our family. But yeah, I don't do a long bedtime thing. And again, I think it's just whatever works for you as a parent, do that thing, and what works for your child. Some kids do need a longer bedtime routine. And so hopefully you have that time and capacity to do that. But fortunately, I think probably for the ages of our kids, we're able to say, man, dinner time, devotional time is when we're like talking and we're having together time, and then go to sleep.
Yeah. I think it's so great. It's really about reflecting on who you are as a parent, really, and what you want for your kids, and then going after it, right? Refocusing right back on there. And I think that'll bring a lot of encouragement to our listeners. And I think you've said this throughout, but let's not allow guilt to control us, because I've been there so many times too. It's like you think you're supposed to be a certain way, but just be who God called you to be, and figure out your why and what you're striving after, and go get it.
Absolutely.
But you guys, I've really enjoyed this time. I've loved the practical. I love your relationship. I mean, even you're just sitting here with your headphones, sharing the same headphones because you love each other so much.
We dare not have our own headphones.
No.
But thanks for being on today.
Thanks so much for having us. This was so great.
Well, I hope today's episode was an encouragement to you wherever you are on this foster care journey. Now, we want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, we have a ton of great content for you over at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time.